Hello, good evening. It's just me today. Just wanted to jump in and share some thoughts on triple captain Haaland as part of the double pivot. So no shame with me today. Instead, ultimately, what I wanted to do, I've been putting a few things out on Twitter. I've seen people putting their own comments on Twitter about liking it for this week, and it's hard to sort of have a discussion on Twitter. It's hard to get your points across, and fundamentally, this game is about having fun, playing it your own way. But I did want to take an opportunity and just sort of go through a few of the thoughts I have about this game, how I can see it potentially playing out, or ultimately what my thoughts are on whether or not to triple captain Haaland. So, yeah, look, what we're going to try and cover off through this is the chip itself, the triple captain chip. How valuable is it? How much do we really need to pay attention to it? The player, Erling Haaland, and of course the opponent, Ipswich. So, look, jumping straight into it, the chip, the triple captain chip, nice new graphic for it, looks lovely. I guess if we just pull this all back and look at how valuable it is out of all the chips, we have 38 game weeks, we have 11 players, we have our 4 subs. So that's 418 players, 38 captaincy choice, 418 players that will play. That 11 times the 38. We have 38 captaincy choices for an extra player each week. So in total, we have 456 players. The triple captain chip gives you one extra once. So on the scale of things, it's not that impactful. If we actually look at it a bit further and look at it in comparison to the other chips, the free hit, you've got that opportunity to get 11 players extra in a double game week, or ultimately in a season like this, it could be used to navigate single game weeks, or if there's an occasion where we might have a lower double game week, with a couple of teams that perhaps people don't own, it is a good opportunity to be able to attack those, and you get 11 people for it. On your bench boost, you're getting 4 extra players, either in a double game week or a single game week. Triple captain, once again, it's 1 extra player. So look, whilst I'm doing this and whilst I've got my opinion about it, at the end of the day, it is just 1 extra player, so it's not the biggest pain in the world. Yes, you want your triple captain to work out more than your captain each week, but it's not a disaster. Your other chips do carry more valuable weight throughout the season, so have fun with it and don't let what I say influence you one way or another. I think fundamentally it comes down to what you think and you sort of looking at the information you agree with and making your decision from there. Onto the player. And look, sort of just going into Haaland himself. I like Haaland. I've got nothing wrong with Haaland, and I've got nothing wrong with triple captaining in a single game week. In fact, this slides on the past, and yes, it's a bit of a look at me. I did well once, but I did well once, and it was actually myself and Alex, who people know as sort of the Man City person who now is doing a lot more football related stuff and a lot less FPL related stuff. But he and I both had the thought process coming into game week 4 last season about Fulham. And what we were looking at, it wasn't just Haaland v Fulham. We were looking into it in a lot more detail. We were looking at, in particular, what the key matchups are. So, there's an image around here, sort of in the center of the page from FPL Lens, Gabe, who fantastic analysis when he was part of Net That Hall. And again, he's highlighting the positional matchup and how they can go through it. We also looked in detail about Fulham and about the fact that Paulinho may have been leaving at that point, or was rumoured to, and what that impact was on the overall Fulham team, who the other players were that were missing, and fundamentally who Man City had, players like Rodri as part of that squad. So we did a space on it, we did threads on it, we shared our thoughts on it, and it worked. We were fortunate because, of course, you've got to be fortunate to get returns just in general in this game. Players are sort of sub 50% to score in most weeks. So to get a good return and end up with the 60 points off the triple captain, 20 in total was good. And look, the reality is throughout that game week, it wasn't going our way through the game itself. It was a slow start. He got an assist. We were kind of messaging each other going, 11 points is fine, but he kept scoring and we got there in the end. So, yes, I have nothing against doing a triple captain in a single game week. Is it better in a double game week? Probably. But my argument's not against doing it in a single game week whatsoever. My argument's got nothing to do with me not owning him. I do own him, and I will be captaining him. Moving on to the player himself, and look, let's just look at him. 22-23 season, and this is some of the stuff Alex and I were using when we were looking at him in the Fulham game. He scored 22 of his 36 goals at home, 61.1%. 7 of his assists at home, 87.5%. And he got 4 hat-tricks at home: Palace, United, Forest and Wolves. If we then compare that to last season, he got 15 of his 27 goals. So look, a small, negligible drop-off in terms of percentages, down to sort of that 55.6. 3 of his 5 assists were at home, so overall less assists, less at home. It is what it is. And both hat-tricks were at home, Fulham and Wolves. But in that same season, he only scored 2 or more one other time at home, United and Everton. He braced away from home for United, Chelsea, Tottenham and Burnley. So there's not really anything that's jumping out when we're looking at a player and the fixtures. If we look at that in the 22-23 season, Palace, United, Forest, Wolves, but Forest were a newly promoted team towards the start of the season, so we are in a kind of similar situation. But the way that Forest approach the game isn't necessarily, if we think about how Forest play and how they've typically played since coming up, I do think there's elements that aren't going to be the same as Ipswich. And when we look at Palace and we look at Wolves and United, these are teams that do like to attack and go on against the opposition. So again, it's hard to see. Fulham and Wolves the following season, the 2 hat-tricks. Fulham, the one that was fortunate enough to use a chip on. And Wolves at the end of the season, where he got 4 goals. Again, it's Wolves again, right? That's back-to-back seasons where he's got a hat-trick at home against Wolves. Maybe Wolves could be a good fixture later in the season. If we look onto, a little bit more of it and looking at the downside, in the 22-23 season, he blanked at home against Bournemouth, Leeds, Brentford, Newcastle, Chelsea. So we're looking at teams like Bournemouth, Leeds, Brentford here, less so Newcastle and Chelsea, but Bournemouth, Leeds and Brentford, where he failed to get an attack in return. And he only got 1 against Southampton, Fulham, Everton, West Ham, Spurs, Villa or Arsenal, right? So again, the former 4 are ones where arguably we might see that as quite a favourable fixture, particularly when Fulham, the following season, he got that haul against. Then we look at who he blanked at home against last season, and again we see Bournemouth on there. And we see West Ham, who only got 1 the season before. And we see Burnley, a newly promoted team. We see Chelsea and Spurs again. And we see Newcastle again. So again, like we don't really want to be captaining him against Chelsea, Spurs and Newcastle at home. And he got 1 return against Forest, Brentford, United, Arsenal and Luton. So Forest, Brentford and Luton, again, like we're looking at teams like Forest, Brentford, Luton, Palace, Bournemouth, Burnley, Leeds, Everton, where he's getting 0, Southampton, where he's getting 0 or 1 attack in returns. And if we actually take that step back and look at the sort of previous slide again, in a weird way, Haaland seems to do well against some of the stronger opposition. Man United in particular, he has a great time against. But it is hard. And is that down to the opposition and how they look to play, and the fact that fundamentally we want Haaland to do well, but Pep Guardiola is a manager and he wants the team to win. So he's less focused on Haaland. But if he sees Haaland as that opportunity to be able to take attention from teams and occupy multiple defenders and create space for the other players, then he'll do that. To him, it doesn't matter if Haaland gets that hat-trick. To him, it matters that they win that game. And they've had games where they have slipped up. Where do we have next on here? The opposition, cool. We are finally onto the opposition. And like I said, this isn't going to be the longest in the world, probably about 20 minutes at most. Opposition. So what do we know about Ipswich? Let's be honest, very little. This is the Premier League. We have very little information about Ipswich in the Premier League. Beat Wolves last season in the FA Cup. They lost to Fulham, both at Portman Road, so at Ipswich. They conceded less away from home, 25, than they did at home last season, 32, in the Championship. They scored less away from home, 33, than at home, 59, so quite a lot less. But that was the Championship, right? And both of these are indicative of a more defensive, conservative approach, i.e. less of that high press that we saw against Liverpool, less of that trying to win it up and leaving those spaces behind and trying to be on that front foot, and more of that mid to low block that, if we go back to it, Brentford, Southampton, Leeds, it's not really a Haaland game. But again, it was in the Championship. And look, that's kind of an issue to me where if we go back to the decision when I went on the Fulham one, there was information, there was history of it, there was data where I could kind of see how Fulham set up, how the manager sets up. We had knowledge of the manager, we had knowledge of players. We don't have that with Ipswich. So we are making a lot of assumptions if we're saying this is the best fixture for him, because we've got 1 game sample size. And it's not enough to go off of. I'd rather have a little bit more information personally. And again, personal situation, he could do well in this game. But we're missing that key component, right, with the opposition and who they are. And look, Shane and I covered this off, the Liverpool game last week. Versus Liverpool, they pressed really early, right? They were very high up the pitch trying to win the ball back, and they tired later on. They left gaps in the half space, particularly behind Leif Davis. We can see this here again, like on that side behind Leif Davis, both in attack and in possession and out of possession. There is a massive gap on that right hand side. And the left hand side doesn't look that great either, if we're honest. But that middle looks pretty congested, like a mid to low block. And we look at Liverpool's territory of control, and I get it. Jota had multiple chances, two big chances. He dominated against Greaves. He's 5'9". But Diogo Jota is not Erling Haaland, right? The way that Jota plays, it is going to be a lot more mobile in behind, dragging defenders away, being involved in that build-up, getting multiple touches. And we can see that from Liverpool in possession here, right? Where Salah's further progressed than him. Diaz is. At times as well, we've got like Sobsalai moving further forward. We've got just a range of people just moving into that space because he's more of that interchange. And yes, it enables him to give and go and get behind those defenders. But he is a different player, right? And we have to acknowledge that he is that different player that's caused different issues for that team throughout the game. Haaland will do some of that, but at the same time, he's not going to have that volume of touches, and he is going to be much more of that physical player who's going to be trying to create that space around him. And yeah, if we look a little bit more about the opposition, yeah, I think this is like, again, this just kind of reiterates it a little bit more, where we can kind of see these passing networks. We can see that Salah's pretty high up. We can see that Jota is sort of a little bit disconnected. And a lot of those passing networks are going around them. And we would expect to see similar things for Haaland. And of course, it's Haaland. I will keep coming back to the fact that it is Haaland and he could do well. So let's take a look at City last game. And again, playing against Chelsea, impossible to be pulling too many narratives from it, or what we can say. Look, number one, Ipswich won't cause anywhere near threat. Well, they won't cause any threat fundamentally to City. City will win this game, and to go back to that, I'm comfortable and confident in City winning 3-4-0. It's just about how they win, how they score, how they get those goals. And if we look at Man City in possession, they attack the half space significantly more than zone 14. Zone 14 is simply where you're going to find Haaland. A little bit further forward, he'll be in the box more often, but a lot more of this out wide. And we could expect to see the same against Ipswich. And Doku was the furthest forward in possession, which again is a telling point because he will be that chaos maker. And yes, he will get down the wings and he will pull the ball back. But quite often when you've got a player in that middle, like a Haaland, and you've got a team who, if we assume that Ipswich might set up like a Brentford, like a Leeds, like a Wolves, like a Burnley, then he'll have a player either side of him the entire time monitoring him. So he's kind of moving over here. They'll both move there, one either side, one in front, one behind, to kind of just prevent that opportunity of him being able to pull off behind. So when Doku, when Foden get to those wide spaces, yes, they'll be cutting it back. But who are they going to be cutting it back to? Is it going to be more likely to be a Kovacic, to be a KDB, who's going to be in that zone 14 a little bit more because now Haaland's created that space? Or is it going to be Haaland? Are they going to play it into him? Because it is Haaland, but do you want to play it into a person that's got two people on him with a lower possibility of scoring? Or do you want to actually go for, possibly a bit more of that space that he's then created for you? It's to be seen, right? We just don't know. Opposition, again, there's discussions like these players were playing in League One 2 years ago. Some of them were, sure, some of them were, and they've progressed and they've done well. Jamie Vardy was playing in the conference not that long ago, and he went on to win the league and be Golden Boot scorer for Leicester, right? We do have to appreciate players develop. Lots of players get signed from lower leagues. So we have to acknowledge that, and we have to acknowledge as well there have been a large volume of purchases. It's a shame that Calvin Phillips is sort of forbidden from playing against Man City because that could have been a nice little game for him. But we do have to appreciate they have strengthened in a few different areas there. We still don't know anything because it's game 2, right? New players, how they're going to work. Some of them have been signed following on from being on loan last season. But again, this is just information we don't know, and we're just going to have to take guesses at. And again, the opposition, and this is like opposition meets player. This is also from Rob T FPL, and it's a point, right, where the models say this, the models say that. This is a review of how he performed against the models. The models loved him against Luton, he got a goal. The models loved him against West Ham, nothing. Bournemouth, nothing. Wolves, brilliant. We've already seen that. Wolves, back-to-back fixtures, back-to-back seasons rather, at home, hat-trick. Keep an eye on it. We saw him against Forest, 1 goal. Salah against Sheffield United, no goals. Against Everton, 2. Man U, 1. Fulham, none. So like it's there or thereabouts, and you've got to ask yourself, like, how likely is it? What are these relying themselves on? Because I have no doubt whatsoever that Haaland, over the course of a season, will be involved in 38 to 40% of Man City's goals. And I do think they'll score 4 goals in this game. But I think there will be certain games where he will be involved in less of those goals based on the opposition. And I think there'll be other games where he'll be involved in 100% of the goals based on the opposition. So we do have to appreciate that the model will sometimes put inputs in without actually looking at how teams may set up, how they may approach the game. So models are great. There is good time for them, but we have to appreciate they're not always going to be inputting that data. Fantastic though that they did get Man United on there as one of the top ones through last season. That's quite an enjoyable moment for us all. Cool. And then just jumping back onto the chip, there's future opportunities for it. There's going to be plenty. It's game week 2, where we'll know more about the opposition, where we can be more confident in the upside, where we can maybe use it on someone else. We could use it again. I'm keeping an eye on that Wolves fixture. Southampton and Leicester might be worse than Ipswich defensively. We don't know, right? It's game week 1, which is what I keep coming back to. The model after 1 game week says this is the best fixture all season. Arguably, the model after 10 game weeks will go, that wouldn't have made the top 4 now. We don't know at this point. So we do have to appreciate that. And, from my own perspective, going back to the one before, if we look at some of these, it wouldn't surprise me if this game wasn't one of Haaland's top 5 scores this season at all. In fact, it would probably surprise me personally more if it was, just based on how I think this game could potentially go. Then on to the wild card, the caveats, right? So look, fully appreciate I've given you all of this, right? It's my opinion, it's my view. At the end of the day, it's still Haaland. He could have 3 touches, score a hat-trick, 9 touches, score 9 goals. So we do have to appreciate that. Also, with that analysis and what I'm saying of how I see the game playing, if Doku and Foden are sort of going down the wings, cutting in, then there is an increased likelihood that there could be a leg left there, particularly from a Leif Davis running back, trying to get back onto it, clipping the heels, etc. So Haaland could be completely marked out of the game, and sort of the tactical analysis could be absolutely spot on, but he can score a hat-trick of penalties, right? So again, caveats here, there is a decent chance. The other caveat, again, to say it once more, Ipswich are unknown, and that's a really important one that I'll keep coming to. Caveat as to why I don't like doing it, but also a caveat as to why it could absolutely smash it for anyone who does go for it. And then, yeah, I've said I've been good with Ollie Watkins. With my triple captain. We also have to highlight that I put out a tweet pretty confidently saying if you're captaining Ollie Watkins, I feel bad for you, son. Sheffield United conceded 11 in 5. Opposition strikers scored 1. And in that game, good news was Ollie Watkins only scored 1 goal. My analysis forgot to acknowledge assists and the creation that he could do from that and FPL assists. So, look, I got it absolutely wrong there. And my mistake there, I absolutely doubled down. I transferred Ollie Watkins out on my team. So I got punished. Whereas all I had to do was just not captain him, right? If I had that opinion. I'm not going to be doing something this drastic this time. I'm still going to be captaining Haaland, but I'm not going to be triple captaining him. And I could well end up with egg on my face like I did with the Ollie Watkins one. And I'm more than happy for that to happen because ultimately we're all just kind of sharing our insight, making conclusions off of it. And I just wanted to share this. So look, tying it all up, the reality is it's your team. It's your decision. If it feels right, go with it, right? Like if you genuinely want to do this and triple captain, if your views are, I'd rather have it out of the way, I'd rather be off to a good start. Brilliant, do it. Like don't let anyone tell you you're completely wrong for it. I know I have a tendency to kind of be very strongly opinionated on Twitter, and I always will do. But fundamentally, it's your own game and you should be enjoying it in your own way. So if you do truly, after going through all of it, you go, brilliant, Kieran, I understand everything you're saying, but I'm looking at that part where it's Ipswich, and I'll keep going back to it and going, it's Haaland, it's Ipswich. And I might see that as, okay, cool. Your way of playing it, and absolutely go forward and do it that way. And if you do, good luck. And I genuinely do hope you get the returns that you deserve because I'm going to be captaining him. So yeah, again, still, I do want to get the same points and I do want to do well off of it. Just personally, I'm probably going to wait a little bit longer. Maybe hope that we might get a game against Wolves at home and maybe go for it then. Anyway, thanks a lot for tuning in, anyone who did, or for watching it later on. Really appreciate it, and good luck this game week.